Hey, so I'm just gonna show you walk you through this device, a screaming Janus. So there's two things to understand that's what's going on in this device. So I'll mute the device so I can talk about it and show you for now. So there's two things going on here. One is this simulation, and I'll show you, we can see it now. And these are Janus bunch oscillators. So there's two things going on. One is the simulation. It actually doesn't create any sound itself. It's a mathematical model of sorts. So the other thing that's going on in this device is there's an oscillator bank. So that bank is separate from the simulation. And right now you can see there's number of voices here, number of Janus. So number of Janus is the number of oscillators in the simulation, and number of voices is the number of chains or oscillators in the oscillator bank. And right now they're linked, but I can unlink them, so now we can have more Janus than voices, and that's represented by some of them being darker and not colored. Yeah, and so the voices are the oscillators that we hear, and the Janus are just the simulation oscillators that we see. And the reason why they could be disconnected is maybe you'd want some dynamics of the model from having like 30 of them, but maybe you only want like 2 sounding oscillators or 3. So that's why you can separate them. Otherwise, I connect. What happens in the device is we have this Janus bunch oscillators, and I'll link more info about them in the description. And I just use these dynamics about them, and you can use those to change, to modulate the oscillators in the oscillator bank. So it's a bit hard to describe, so I'll get more in that when I go through these drop-down menus. Let's first just focus on the Janus bunch simulation. And I recommend to just go to that link that I said, gives you more info, but I'll give you a brief kind of explanation of them. Very naive one, maybe. So right now we have 3 Janus bunch oscillators, and what a Janus bunch oscillator is it's a state that's defined by 2 phases. So there's 2 phases. They could be running at the same frequency or different frequencies, and you can change that with this variable here. And so the one oscillator has 2 phases. So this one oscillator has 2 phases, and that's why you see it going in a circle, kinda. And when this is down all the way, those 2 phases are running at the same frequency. When I turn this up, it will add some variety between them, and you'll get maybe more oval patterns than circular ones. And that describes the state of this oscillator. Now, there's what this model explores is kind of syncing that can happen like in nature. So if we have these 2 phases kind of at different frequencies, we can also turn up this, and you can see int var, so it's internal variation. But we can couple those 2 phases so that they sync, and that's done with this parameter here, this internal coupling parameter, and that's what this whole model's about in one sense. So when I turn that up, the phases sync, but the visual is a bit tricky. Actually, I mapped, just like the example I pulled this from, the z-axis value, and later you'll see the color value. Those are kind of mapped to differences in the phases, and so those movements in the z-axis and the coloring will only appear once you start having variety and coupling them. So another thing you can do is have more than one oscillator. I'll just link these. So now we have 3, and right now all their frequencies are the same between them. Each one has 2 phases, and each one right now is the same, but I can add some variance between each external oscillator. So that's done with this one, and now they'll have some variety in their frequencies. You see this one's a lot slower than that one. And we can also couple them externally just like we did internally, so I'll do that. And yeah, now they're starting to couple to each other to try to sync. And you can turn it really high or just a little bit. And I'll turn the simulation rate up a bit. I mean, I'll turn that up and let's try to see it in action. Again, that website I linked is probably better for that. Alright, so right now they're all at the same frequency running, and then I'll add some variety, and then I'll couple them. So hopefully you can see they're trying to affect each other in an attempt to sync together, and I think they might over time sync. Yep, they're getting closer. And then again, now we can add internal variance too, and we get all sorts of cool dynamics when we start doing this and start coupling. So basically you can get all sorts of really interesting dynamics with these oscillators. Okay, so that was a bit of a lengthy explanation, and that's how you can navigate this simulation. And if you click here in the center, it will kind of randomize a new position. Okay, so now let's get to the sound part. So basically I take advantage of these oscillators having 2 phases, and they have an X and Y position and all, and I allow you to map that to this kind of chain, this oscillator chain. And how the chain goes, here I'll pause the video and draw you something. Okay, so I've written out kind of how the chain happens to help you understand it. So how it works is, first, to get the original signal that we hear, and this is for each voice, I might add, so we can get up to 32 voices. So this is just one voice. We have the 2-phase output of the Janus bunch oscillators, and those goes to left and right respectively. So one phase goes to the left, one to the right channel. So they're already totally split. And then they go through a cosine, which turns them into kind of a stepped sine wave. So like kind of an aliased harmonic sine wave kind of thing. And then it gets modulated by the sum of all of the oscillators, and as well as the last result. Actually, those are optional with this. And it's, I should add that it's cross modulation, so the left and right get switched. So that can be completely off. So if these are both off, then there's no modulation from the sum or last result. So this int that modulates it from the sum of the last result, cross modulates it, and this external ext modulates the signal from the sum of all of these. Yeah. All right. Then it goes through a high-pass filter, then a low-pass filter, and then a stereo delay, which you have option for left and right times. You can set them separately. Oops. Okay, how do I go back? Okay, sorry. And then and then I distort or I wave shape the signal a bit, and that gives it its really intense sound. And then there's a feedback afterwards. And here with this FB, it's a bit hard. Oh, and this says if this is on, the feedback signal is the signal after the distortion. But if this is off, then the feedback is the signal before the distortion. Okay, that's why I say complex. And then it goes through this hyperbolic tan function. Yeah. So that gives you an idea of the chain. It's kind of a weird one. And Okay, so then what happens is, well, here we just have some main things, as I said, some kind of settings. I'll kind of skip that for a second, although we went into a bit. And then here on the far right, this is where we modulate things and can set things like the Q and whatnot. So you'll see above every major parameter the delay left time, delay right time, the feedback amount for the left, feedback amount for the right, high pass frequency, low pass frequency, and gain. For all of those, we have a little menu for the modulation source. Let me pause and set them all to 0 so you can see. Okay, so I've set all the modulation sources to this first one, which is just a static spread between the voices. There's no modulation with this symbol. And I've set all the spread and modulation amount to 0. So that's what this second box is. So the first box is kind of the value itself, the central value, and the second box is how much spread or modulation is applied to it. And so those spread are all set to 0. So let's hear it now. Okay, so right now it's just static. Nothing is moving around because there's no modulation applied to it. And what we're hearing is just that chain, just the two phases going through that chain. And I'll change these values so you can see. Okay, so now I'll modulate this high pass value with the X position, and I'll turn on the amount. Or I can do the Y position. Or I can do the Z, which is not really changing, so no point. But I can add some more Janus bunch, and now the Z will change a bit. Not too much. There we go. Right, and then I can also do it by the color, so you see the color is changing, hopefully. And then I can also do it by the phase, the two phases themselves. So this is the first phase going through the sine wave, and here's the second phase. Cool. So, and then again, this is a static spreading. So if I start to add in more voices and turn this to 0, so now they're all the same value, but I can start to spread them statically from the first voice to the last. Cool. And then I'll modulate the low pass with the Y. I'll slow it down. And I'll modulate the delay left time with the color, the right time with the Z position, the feedback with the first phase, the gain maybe with the second phase. Change the Q. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully that's all making a bit of sense. And then we have, like I said, we can change how we cross-modulate with the feedbacks. We can turn it off, or we can do internal. Okay, squash is just dealing with this distortion, and we'll give it kind of this squashing feeling if it's up or down. And like I said, this changes what signal is sent to the feedback, the distorted or not. And then this 8 Hertz scale, this scales the frequency of the phases themselves before they go into the cosine operator. Okay, so that kind of wraps it up. There's one more thing, and that's this save button. And what that does is when you press the save button, it saves the current state of all of the Janus bunch oscillators. So that's nice if you want to recall like that particular point in time when you load your preset or live set. And if you don't press it, it will just kind of randomize or something whenever you load it again. Alright, I hope that helped. Enjoy.